Welcome back to the Basketball Bulletin. My name is Donnie, and today we are covering the latest news around the NBA and Adam Silver. Apparently, Adam Silver did some media availability as we head into the next upcoming NBA season. I'm extremely excited about that. Let me know in the comments as well down below. What's your favorite team, and what are you excited to see from them in this season? If this is your first time here, make sure you do stick around and subscribe to the channel, as Trevor Lane and I keep you guys informed with all of the information around the NBA as it comes out. We've seen a host of small things today, but a lot of extensions are really coming through in the last couple of days as we approach the extension deadline for a lot of these guys. So that's really cool as well. But Chris Mannix did put out this article through Sports Illustrated on the Adam Silver piece. And Adam Silver talks about several things. We released a video earlier today talking about the Clippers situation and all that stuff. Adam does talk more about that in this video, or in this article that we'll cover in the video as well. Let's go ahead and get into it. Among the things Adam Silver expected to be dealing with in his 12th season as the NBA commissioner, an alleged case of salary cap circumvention involving one of the NBA's best players, its wealthiest owner, and a bankrupt climate-conscious financial service company was not one of them. At least not until an episode of Pablo Torre Finds Out's podcast implicated Clippers owner Steve Ballmer in an alleged scheme to skirt salary cap rules by funneling money through a firm that sold carbon offsets before the company went belly up. While Silver has shifted the Clippers case to Wacho, Lipton, Rosen, and Katz, it's going, hopefully I pronounced that right, I probably didn't. It's going to law firm for sticky investigations. He still has plenty on his plate. The league's new national broadcast deal has fans scrambling for channel guides. So we also do have information on kind of the way that Silver, you know how he had some comments last time he did media availability where he talked about the accessibility of NBA games, and he called the sport and it was kind of out of context, absolutely. But one of the main quotes was, you know, we're a highlights league, and a lot of people were upset about that. But he does have a little bit more on that we'll cover as well in this video. And he also apparently talked about the future of the All-Star game. So you said you wanted to see the totality of the evidence before making any judgments on whether or not the Clippers intentionally circumvented the salary cap. Some team executives are asking what you need to see to determine if the team cheated. That was the question that was posed to him. Silver's response was, somebody asked me if circumstantial evidence is enough. And just as in the court of law, sometimes there's direct evidence and sometimes there's circumstantial evidence. And certainly circumstantial evidence alone doesn't prevent findings for one particular side. But then even if in the case of circumstantial evidence, you look at the totality of the circumstances. So it's not formulaic. We will look at everything that's presented to us, and that includes inferences that come from evidence as well. So if by chance that was lost on you, basically Adam is saying that they will still consider the circumstantial stuff and come to a conclusion. The NBA is going to consider it seriously by evaluating the full context and drawing any reasonable concerns that they can from this information. And, you know, that was one of the things I was kind of circulating whenever this all first started. There was, you know, Adam Silver came out, he talked about it the first time, and he said, you know, we're going to look into it as much as we can. We would hate for there to only have been the appearance of impropriety. We know that the online community typically makes assumptions and jumps to conclusions too quickly, just to paraphrase some of the things that he said at the time. But he kind of made it sound like they want to get a clear-cut, definitive smoking gun to show or prove that the Clippers did do this, but that was met with a lot of rebuttal because they don't have to have that, right? If there's enough circumstantial stuff, like he's saying here, they have the ability to say, okay, you know what? This smells, it's just too fishy. This looks like XYZ. And if enough of those things line up, they're able to come to that sort of conclusion and make judgment based on that. So obviously you want to make sure that they get it right as possible. But if they get to a situation where they cannot literally in any way find a smoking gun, which for the record, what even is that? Do you need like an email detailing exactly everything that they've done? Is Pablo's stuff that he sent out enough to suffice for that? Last I heard, Pablo wasn't even brought into this in any way, which I'm perfectly fine with, but they didn't seek out his resources that he had, all those documents, etc. They're going to handle it on their own and do their own investigation. So we'll see what happens with that. Again, last I heard on the topic. But what is that? Like, what is the definitive? And so I don't know what that is. We don't know what the bar is, what the threshold is for that. And so he's saying here that, again, we may not need that. If there's enough fishy stuff, well, we may just make a determination based off of that overall.
Ever hear the Sleeper app? Here's a little secret. It's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, millions of users enjoyed playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. Live stats, real-time updates, and visualizations on all stats. A news feed. This is so important for me. You can get lightning-fast updates on your favorite players and teams. A real-time chat to allow you to engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. So download the #1 sports app today. Experience it for yourself. When you use promo code Bulletin, you get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. And by the way, they do have a phenomenal promo going on right now as well. Free $20 entry. Go check that out. No deposit required. $20 entry for free. Go check them out. Use the link in the description down below, and that promo code is Bulletin.
Thank you, my goat, Trevor. All right, so they asked, do you expect this to be a long investigation? He says, I really don't know. I can say it will take some time just based on past experience. From the reporting so far, many of the sources are anonymous, but there are several of them. And you have here a separate court proceeding. We have a guilty plea by Aspiration co-founder Joe Sandberg for wire fraud. So there's a fair amount of evidence for us to look at. The stakes are very high here. We as a league want to be careful and make sure that not only are we being fair to the Clippers and Ballmer, but also that we have a true understanding of whatever happened here. And I think that's something that kind of gets lost in all this. We really only started to find out a lot about this, obviously, once Pablo publicized this, but this was something that was just a big old scandal in general, right? You know, he talked about the wire fraud stuff. That was a big case, right? So, and this company went under, all that stuff. And one of the things that was happening is when they were doing litigation, they were asking all these questions about XYZ, and they were up there answering these. The Aspiration guys were up there answering these, but I thought it was always pretty shaky that when they got asked questions about like Ballmer or anything like Clipper adjacent, they basically said no comment. They didn't have an answer for it. They refused to answer anything in relation to that, plead the fifth, whatever. They didn't answer anything in relation to that. And so ultimately, we do have, people that have come out as anonymous sources. You can maybe argue how valid that is. I don't know. But anyway, Pablo has a number of that stuff. He's got people that are on the record as anonymous people that have said XYZ happened. This is how it worked. This is what I was told. This is what I saw. All everything, what have you. And so coupling all of this together, if you're Adam, if you're the league, excuse me, you want to make sure that you have every bit of information before you come to a judgment, because I think you really have to get it right, because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that if they did do this, you make an example out of them. And now, firstly, it's not exactly the most fair thing, unfortunately, to the fans, because they obviously didn't do anything to watch the team be penalized. I did see some people saying that. While I can empathize, I still think that they need to make an example, because you just don't want the situation where this is like the blueprint and other teams say, oh, so that's a thing, right? And to be honest, I feel pretty confident that maybe there's some other backroom dealings happening with some other organizations, right? But regardless, you don't want them to sit here and funnel $50 million potentially to somebody. Like that's a lot of money, right? So that's kind of crazy. So you don't want to lay out the blueprint and have them looking at this and saying, oh, that's how you get away with it. Oh, that's how you do this. That's how you do that. I listened to Pablo, and he talked about how, it while out here, and then you sit here and listen to like all this stuff, and it's like, how the hell, like, why do they think this would get away? Why do they think they would get away with this if they did do this? KL2 Aspire XYZ, like that's like so straightforward. Anybody could tell who that is, right? With very little digging and things like that. There's not a lot of a cover up here, but ultimately, Pablo said that this actually was very elaborate. This is something that if they are guilty of this, the NBA, frankly, would have never found out without Pablo's digging and reporting and all that stuff. And maybe even without this company going under, they would have never found out about this stuff, which I think is pretty interesting to consider with the way that all this was. And so if that's the case, regardless, you don't want that blueprint out there. You don't want it to be, oh, if you're elaborate enough, then you guys can get away with it, because we'll never know, wink, wink. But ultimately, I think that you have to come to the right decision, regardless of whether they did it or didn't, even though I think that the evidence supports the idea that they did do it, but that's only one side of it all, of course, to be completely objective. They haven't really come out and refuted a lot of it. They did initially, but as more came out, they kind of just stopped talking about it at all, right? And said, we're just cooperating with the investigation. So ultimately, it will take a while. There's some reporting that it may take until like the All-Star break, for example. That's quite a while, right? We also heard that they wouldn't take speaking of the All-Star break, they wouldn't take the All-Star game away from the Clippers in that instance either. I thought potentially they could just shift it over to Crypto Arena, just go from there. It's still right there. So, but they're still not going to take it away from the Clippers as well. The national broadcast deal that ended TNT's package and brought in NBC, Peacock, and Prime Video was a windfall, 11 years, $77 billion. But critics like Barkley have said that the fragmentation will be damaging. The deal is anti-fan. What would you say to that? So now we're going to transition to more of that type of topic. I accept Charles' point there that this will be a disruption in the short term. I think overtime technology is clearly our friend here. Just by way of example, through the NBA app, which is free to download, you'll be able to have a front door into every game on the service, on any service, that's carrying the NBA. We recognize the transition will be an issue. And for fans who are used to finding the NBA on TNT, obviously we won't be there. We need to help direct them to where our games are located. I also think there's an ongoing shakeout in the media industry. There will be no doubt additional aggregation of some of the streaming services now. I think it's too early to conclude how easy or not it'll be for consumers. That's interesting spin there. My sense is that over time, the consumers and fans generally win in a market economy, and the market and the media companies will respond to what the fans want, because it's, of course, not in our interest to create services that fans find it too difficult to subscribe to. I mean, the fact that we're going from one paradigm that has been in place now for 2 decades and are going to be adding 2 new partners and replacing one, we're going to have to re-educate the fans on where to find the games. Also, as part of the ESPN's app, they made a company decision that they wouldn't only promote their own networks. This goes to the point of a competitive marketplace and wanting to be fan friendly. They want sports fans to know if a game is on Fox or on CBS. That's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, huh? He said, because it almost looks like he meant to say they would only promote their stuff and not be more, but that's what they were already doing. So that's cool that ESPN is going to show people where to find these games, right? That's pretty great. He's ultimately saying, yeah, in the short term, this may be a problem, but it's too early to look at it that way. We'll see what happens in the long term. I think technology's on our side. These companies, there may be some aggregation of these companies, and ultimately they're going to try to be more pro-consumer, because if nobody's subscribing to this stuff, then what's the point, right? So, but I don't think you can have that perspective right now, because the right now still matters, right? I wouldn't just sweep under the rug right now and say, well, in some due time, hypothetically anyway, because that's what it is. Hypothetically, there may come a time where it's easier to find our product. It's easier to find our games. The simple reality is that right now there is a ton of segmentation, or it's just a lot of breaking up, I guess, for lack of a better term, of where to find the product. You can find it here, you can find it there, you can find it here. And then there's still always the stupid recurring blackouts. There's just so much in here to where it makes it extremely hard to keep up with the team. And if you try to follow a team that's especially not a local team, or by the way, blackouts are so annoying because I live in several markets, so I'm always getting blacked out. It's annoying. It's really annoying. But if you try to follow a team that you're not in market for, you may have to subscribe to multiple things. Like you're gonna be all over the place trying to subscribe to all this stuff, and it's quite a lot, man. And then setting aside the fact that you can go in the NBA app, you can go in the ESPN app to look at where these games are streaming on. But it's still a hassle to have all these services and manage it that way, right? It's just not pro-consumer, no matter how you slice it. I think they're looking at it and saying, well, so many people nowadays have so many subscriptions. I myself am somebody that I probably spend way too many on subscriptions. I got some that I like for myself. I have some that my wife and I watch a lot of shows on. We watch shows because shows are all over the place. But ultimately, we're spending so much money, it's like, damn, well, we might as well go back to cable. But at the same time, I still wouldn't go back to cable because I like being able to watch whatever I want on demand, even though I'm sure they have some similar stuff nowadays. Anyway, I don't think that is the right mindset, though. We're developing our app independent of ESPN, but no doubt we're looking at the same market information, and we are all responding to what fans are saying loud and clear, that there is real confusion in the marketplace. I know firsthand, and I won't pick on any particular sport that's not mine, but I think we've all had the experience where we're ready to watch the game, can't find it, and end up going to Google and saying, where's game X on? Even then, it's not always so clear. Over time, I think these new technologies will be very fan-friendly, but we're going to have to work through the transition. The local TV rights are a mess. Regional networks are shutting down. Others are in bankruptcy. Others are, in your words, teetering. How big of a problem is this? It's a significant issue for the league right now. It's been a large part of our historic business model. And for our teams, a major revenue source has been the distribution of these games in their local markets, largely through cable and satellite. Many of our regional sports networks only just emerged from bankruptcy, and others are now defunct. I'm not overly concerned because in the same way several of the major streaming services were saying publicly only a couple of years ago that live sports were unlikely to become part of their model, they're now all embracing it. It's the same way that they're embracing sports for national and global distribution, that they will discover the value of local distribution as well. By way of example, a local game on average has twice the engagement of a national game, meaning a fan in Milwaukee of the Bucks or in the Bucks' market is likely to watch a Bucks game twice as long as a fan outside of their region. As the marketplace responds to what the viewers and consumers want, there's no doubt these local games are highly desirable for fans in those markets. Silver is a very he's a very optimistic guy. I understand what he's saying here, though. He's saying that ultimately this will come back full circle. Regardless of that, it'll come back full circle. It'll be more available locally as well. But that all sounds nice, right? But I'm going to remain pessimistic until I see it, because who knows how long it can take. It could take 5 years. It could take 10, it could take 15 years. I don't know. It could take 2 years. I don't know, right? As traditional television continues to decline, and that decline has only accelerated in the last few years, people's default watching becomes streaming services as opposed to traditional television. They're going to want to be able to get these games on those streaming platforms, and the streaming platforms are going to want to differentiate themselves in the marketplace by being the one that carries these local games. Lastly, I think as the marketplace just demonstrated the value of NBA games nationally by virtue of that example I gave about in terms of engagement, there's absolutely no reason why these games proportionally should have less value locally than they do nationally. If anything, they should be worth more locally. Okay, so that's mostly it. I mean, he does talk more about some other stuff in here, talking about gambling, etc., and the way that he views all that stuff. This is quite a long article from SI on Adam Silver, and then again, the All-Star game is in there. I'm not ready to give up on the All-Star game is the quote I see on the screen right now. I'm not going to even bother with that. But, I think ultimately it's nice to at least, regardless of whether I agree or disagree with what he's saying, it's nice to at least hear what he has to say and where his ideas are, where his mindset is on this stuff, whether it's the Clippers stuff or the NBA's accessibility in terms of where you can find games even. Like that's not something I think we should have to really dig too hard for, but here we are in the current era where he says these technologies will make it easier, but so far up to this point, they've just made it harder, right? That's kind of where we're at. So ultimately, though, I do think at some point, I can agree with him, at some point it will come back full circle. It'll be easier to watch this stuff. And maybe we just need to get, like he mentioned, like an aggregation of services. Why don't they just make a big old streaming platform, right? It's going to take a lot of people to sign off on that. It's going to be hard to do with all the money and all that stuff. Big old streaming service that's just got everything in one. Not everything, but like a handful of different, like Prime Video, Peacock, these things that are just all there. Put it all in one spot, in one application, call it NBA, whatever, right? You could do something like that. And that would be hard to figure out, but maybe at some point down the line that happens, or something like that happens where it gets easier. But again, very optimistic, very hopeful view from Silver and myself. But let me know what you guys think about that. Let me know what you guys think about the Clippers stuff. Ultimately, there's not a ton here on the Clippers. It was more just him talking about the fact that they're still digging into it. It'll take a while. He wants to be fair to them. Stuff that we've already heard. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. And if you want to know more information about the Clipper situation, like I said earlier today, Trevor put out a video covering it. Make sure you check it out right now.